The following is a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome in, students to the game. My name is Alex Baumann, and I'm joined by my co-host today, Gray Oldenburg. Unfortunately, Nathan Gladwell cannot be with us. He had some family arrangements to attend to, but Gray, you're probably glad he's not here so he can't dog you about the Iron Bowl and Auburn's attempt to throw a flea flicker or whatever pass that was using Darkways Hunter. But since we're not going to dive into that just yet, let's talk about Feast Week in college basketball for Auburn and Alabama. Auburn goes to Maui and wins their first ever invitational there, beating number 5 Iowa State in the first round, then beats number 12 UNC in the second round, and then beats Memphis in the championship game to capture that trophy. Had amazing performances from Janai Broome there, Dylan Cardwell, Chaney Johnson, Pettiford. But what you've seen from this team, not only in this invitational in Maui, but the entirety of this really short season thus far, do you think Auburn is the best team in the country, or is it still Kansas?
I think they are currently the best team in the country, and obviously there's bias for me there. But I think I have a lot of proof of concept to back this up. I think Auburn plays better on both ends of the floor than Kansas. I think Auburn, considering who they've played, especially the defenses that they've played, and they'll continue to see very, very good defenses throughout this schedule that they have. But the defenses that they played, and they're still, in fact, the number one offense in the country in terms of efficiency rating. That's wild to me. And the fact that Auburn has the best player in the country in Janai Broome and Kansas does not, I think that puts Auburn over the top for me. And I think it does for a lot of people. The national perspective of this team has completely changed. You had people like John Fanta and Matt Norlander, both AP voters and both national writers, who didn't even have Auburn in the top 25 in their preseason. They are woken up now. Both of them have them number one. And that's the thing you love to see as a fan of a team who I knew how good Auburn was this year. I knew they had a chance to be this good. I didn't think we'd be sitting here 7-0, but what this Auburn team has done on both sides of the ball, how deep they are, how they're shooting the ball well from three, but they're not relying on it because they don't have to. The flex cut offense that Bruce Pearl runs is just going to be unstoppable for people to guard with the personnel that Auburn has. You got a great schedule still lining up. I'm excited, I will say, and this is weird for me to say because obviously I'm going to root for Auburn to win every single game, but I'm excited for this Auburn team to get exposed. I don't think this team has gotten exposed yet. It's this Auburn team has played some unbelievable teams, but none of these unbelievable teams have come in there and pushed Auburn around just yet. And that may be nobody's going to go in and push Auburn around, especially on the inside. But even in the first half against Iowa State, I don't think they were exposed. I think Iowa State was just red hot from everywhere. I mean, they were making everything. And you give credit to Iowa State. If they're just going to make every shot, they're going to win. But the law of averages says they're not. And Auburn started to make their shots, and Auburn wins in the last second tip in by Broome. That's a very good Iowa State team, by the way. Get a little off topic here, but my point is, all things considered, they will get exposed. They're not going to go 40-0. They will get exposed, and I think that will be very, very good for Bruce Pearl and the staff to go back to and point to some things that this Auburn team needs to get fixed. I don't think this Auburn team has played their best 40 minutes yet. There are some nitpicks. I think J.P. Pegues is still coming along, learning the offense. Auburn hasn't had to rely on him because Denver Jones has done really well taking over the starting point guard role. But I don't think this team has played their best basketball yet, and which is crazy because some people have them as the best team in the country. They're 7-0 and 4-0 against Quad 1 teams. So it is crazy to think, but this Auburn team, the sky is the limit for this team. And I'm just appreciative to watch them.
Are you worried that they peaked at the wrong time? Because as we've seen with Auburn teams in years past, they peak at the wrong time and they fizzle out in the tournament. You talk about Jabari Smith, Walker Kessler losing early in the tournament, last year losing to Yale in the first round. Are you worried that this team's going to peak too early and fizzle out once again in a tournament with one of the most talented rosters Bruce Pearl's had at Auburn.
Yeah, and that's always going to be a thing where you're playing really well at one time doesn't mean you're going to play really well at the right time, and that comes with anybody. But I don't think they are peaking at the right time, and my reasoning for that is Auburn's shooting the three ball really well right now, but they're not relying on it. That 2019 team that went to the Final Four had to shoot the ball incredibly well to win those games, beat North Carolina in the Sweet 16, beat Kentucky in the Elite Eight, even beat Kansas in the round of 32. They had to shoot that well to go on that run. And in that 2021-22 team that you were just referencing with Jabari and Walker Kessler, they were shooting it very well in the middle of that SEC schedule, which got them that SEC regular season championship, but they didn't shoot well when it mattered, and that cost them. And they weren't able to get through that. I don't think this Auburn team is as reliant on the three as years past. And there are a lot of teams that are at the top of the college basketball world right now that are still reliant on threes. And very, very, if the threes go down, they can beat anybody. If the threes don't go down, they could lose to anybody. But that's not what this Auburn team is built on. This Auburn team is built on going inside, playing 9, 10 guys, playing super hard on the defensive end, and just outworking your opponent. That's what we've seen in those 4 quad one games that Auburn has played. They've just beaten their opponent down and had the ball last. And that's been the winning formula for this Auburn team. And in years past, the winning formula was, well, we need to shoot 40% from three, because if we shoot 18% from three, this team's just going to beat us. I don't think Auburn's going to have that problem this year, but Auburn's just got to keep playing the way that they have been, and keep utilizing the kind of depth, the kind of length, the kind of talent at the top end of this Auburn team has. They're going to get exposed. They're going to lose. Once again, Auburn fans, we're not going 40-0. This basketball team is very, very good. No basketball team is going 40-0. No basketball team is just going to run through the type of schedule that Auburn has and just beat everybody. I fully expect them to lose multiple games before the SEC tournament. It's just about how you lose those games, how you respond, and if you're playing the best basketball at the right time. And I still think, just like I said earlier, Alex, I still think the best basketball for this team is ahead of them.
Well, Gray, you talked about him a little bit. Janai Broome, we knew he was good. We knew he was really good, but we didn't know he was best basketball player in the country good. And we've seen the growth from just a short period of time from last year to this year. But what have you seen from Janai Broome in just that short span that's proven to you that he is the best player in college basketball right now?
Man, it's just what he's added to his game year by year. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little comparison. For Auburn fans, this is what I want to preach to Auburn fans who are really excited about watching this guy throughout this year. Like in 2010, in that college football season, it wasn't until about mid-November, maybe the Georgia game, that I was really appreciating watching Cam Newton on a football field and in an Auburn uniform. I will not appreciate Janai Broome in an Auburn uniform this year, because what he is doing, I'm not saying he is the Cam Newton of Auburn basketball. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you need to appreciate the type of talent that this guy is and what he's doing for Auburn University, what he's doing for Auburn basketball. This dude's fantastic. I watched him. I actually went to the Auburn-Morehead State game, the first year of that 2021-2022 season with Jabari Smith and Walker Kessler, where we played against Janai Broome. And Janai Broome was, for a long time throughout that season, was the only one to give Walker Kessler fits in the post. And yes, he was a back to the basket, and just want to post up, get rebounds, block shots type of big. Didn't have much versatility in his game, which kind of cost him against a guy like Walker Kessler, who really did have the versatility in his game, and especially Jabari Smith. But what he's done year by year, even when he's at Auburn, in improving his game, the 3-point shot, him shooting 35% from three is just that was not heard of. He couldn't have dreamed of that at Morehead State or even in his first year at Auburn. That just wasn't going to happen. He's improved at the free throw line, which is, I mean, he's going to have to. Teams are going to have to foul him, especially in the post. He's a great passer. Playing him alongside a guy like Dylan Cardwell is definitely new this year from Bruce Pearl, but allowing him and Cardwell to work that high-low action, especially when one of those two is getting double teamed, is going to be fantastic. Both of those guys are skilled and experienced centers. And then what he does scoring in the post is just ridiculous. His left-hand spin hook is maybe the most unguardable move I've in college basketball this year. And his touch around the rim is fantastic. He's turned into a great rebounder and a great shot blocker as well. I know he's really upped those numbers from last year. It's his timing. He completely changes Auburn when he's on the court. And last year, of course, yeah, he was good. He was all SEC first team. He'd win player of the week every once in a while. He had a great SEC tournament, and even a game against Yale, he was fantastic. I think he had 25 and 15 in that game against Yale. But just his improvement year by year is really something special.
Yeah, I mean, it's looking at just 2023 and 2024, that season to this season, 2024, 2025. If you're on YouTube or Facebook, you can see this. But if you're just listening, I'll try to help you out here and make you visualize it a little bit. In 2023, 2024, that season, Janiah Broome, 16.5 points per game, 8.5 rebounds, 2.2 blocks, 54% from the field, and 35% from three. And then you go to this year, 20.7 points per game. That's top 25 in the country. 12.9 rebounds per game. That's first in the country. 3.3 blocks per game. 59% from the field. So a 5% jump in field goal percentage, which is pretty major for a big man. And then the 3-point percentage drops by 1%. But that 1%, I mean, that's not a whole lot. But if you were to go back to Morehead State, Janiah Broome, it would have been 0% twice in those years. And you go to now shooting 35% in his ability to create his own shot, his own three-pointer. If you watch the Maui Invitational, you saw Janiah Broome do multiple step-back three-pointers, come off flex cuts, make those jump shots. I mean, he looks like a tall Mark Sears at some points. Yeah. But the improvements Janiah Broome has made is going to make this Auburn team go. And don't call me crazy, but if Zach Edey can go in the lottery, if Janiah Broome can continue to play like this and can continue to shoot the three ball the way he's been doing it, he will be a lottery pick this upcoming draft, even though it is pretty stacked with Cooper Flagg, Ace Harper, or Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper. Janiah Broome is a stud, and he has shown it year after year to these scouts. And I hope they bite on it and they take it because he can make a franchise really good.
Yeah, I agree. And what he did 2 years ago, not this past offseason, but 2 off seasons ago, when he used the ability to go put your name in the NBA draft, go through the NBA combine, and get that feedback from scouts and see what those scouts are saying and where he needs to improve on and what he needs to continue building on. They told him, look, you're probably not an NBA 5, so you need to be an NBA 4. All right, let me go back to Auburn and play the 4. Let me go back to Auburn and shoot 35% from three, hitting, just like you said, those sidestep, step back threes off of flex cuts, just ridiculous. Ridiculous. But he really is. And if he continues to play like this, he's definitely in the National Player of the Year conversation, which is just absolutely ridiculous. We're talking about Auburn basketball here. 10 years ago, if I would have told somebody that Auburn would have the lead in the National Player of the Year, people would have them number 1 in the country. They just won the Maui Invitational, for God's sakes, beating North Carolina. Are you kidding me? That's ridiculous.
Tony Barbie could only hope to do any of that at this point.
Tony Barbie said you can't recruit to an Under Armour school. And Auburn, starting next year, will not be an Under Armour school, actually. It will be a Nike school. But Bruce Pearl, what he's done for this university and for that program, unheard of.
Speaking of somebody doing unheard of things for a program, Alabama and Nate Oates. They go to the Players Area Festival, the first ever one of that in Las Vegas. They lose in the championship to Oregon 83-81. 2-point difference. Had a questionable goaltending call. Could have gone either way, but they decided to keep the goaltend on there, and that really ended up being the difference in the game. But Alabama had multiple chances to win that game at the end. Mark Sears had the pass at the end of the game, or had the ball to end the game, but pass the ball up, and the time ran out. Frustrating from Bama fans' perspective, but you did, when you were there, beat Rutgers 95-90, and then beat number 6 Houston 85-80, and it looks like Auburn and Alabama did break Houston because they did not look good the next game against San Diego State. Great. Obviously, Alabama did not get the result they wanted going to the Players Era Festival, not get a big bonus with the NIL money. You lose Artrell Wright, so most likely for the season with that, he was shooting really well from the 3. You're most likely getting sometime later in December, so that'll be a big get back. He was the American Athletic Conference Co-Player of the Year last season, so it's not like he's a scrub or anything. He'll bring a lot of things to this team. But 2 early losses for Alabama. We saw them struggle early in the year last year with their tough schedule. But these struggles seem a little bit different because you had Jaron Stevenson up until the Rutgers game, 0 for 18 on the season from the 3-point line. Mark Sears is playing the worst basketball I've ever seen him play in an Alabama uniform. What is wrong with this Bama team that was much different than what was wrong with it last year when they decided in March they were going to go to the Final Four?
Well, I'll say this. When we were talking about Auburn, I mentioned that there are a couple teams at the top echelon of college basketball that live and die by the 3. Live and die. And Alabama is at the top, the tippity top at that list because they are a fantastic basketball team. They're really, really deep. They have really good freshmen this year, and Darion Reed and LeBaron Philon and those guys. Diabate, but really impressed with his game. And Cliff Amori is what I don't want to say he is what they were missing in terms of a center, but he does allow Grant Nelson to go back to his original position at the 4. I think that is the biggest thing Amori provides for Alabama right now. Obviously, we'd like to see him improve in terms of production, but this Alabama team extremely, this Alabama team lives and dies by the 3, and right now the shots aren't falling. And it's keeping other teams in the game because Alabama will go on runs where they're hitting transition threes and they make a little run, they make a little push, and it looks like Alabama's about to pull away, and then they go cold, and another team's able to get back in the game. We saw that with Purdue. We saw that with Houston. Saw that with Rutgers, even though they were able to finish that game really well, and we saw that with Oregon. That is concerning. As a fan of this Alabama team, you want them to run more continuous offense. Right now, and I know Nate Oates was really, really trusting in his senior guard and Mark Sears, and of course, absolutely, Mark Sears is still one of the best players in this conference and best players in the country. And just because he went 1 for 10 against Oregon from 3, just because he passed up the final shot, just like you mentioned earlier, and just because he hasn't played the way we all expected him to play, does not mean he's any worse. I just think Mark Sears needs to get into more of a structured, continuous offense. Nate Oates really likes to let him run, really loves transition, which is good. And in terms of tempo, Alabama's the best in the country. Nate Oates' Alabama, especially the past few years, looks like the 2005 to 2012 Roy Williams, North Carolina, because they get out and run. And you know when you're about to play Alabama, it's going to be you got to score in the 90s to beat them. Even if they don't shoot the ball well from 3, you're going to have to score in the 90s because of how fast they play the game. But right now, that's what's hurting Alabama. What was so successful and what Alabama was able to lean on to get them to the Final Four last year is hurting them at the beginning of this year. And that's because it's not consistent enough. It's not a consistent style. You're going to lose some of these games because the law of averages says Mark Sears isn't going to shoot 47% from 3. And LeBaron Philon's not going to shoot 47% from 3. And Grant Nelson's not going to play North Carolina every week. Jaron Stevenson's not going to play like he did against North Carolina every week. And you're not going to get the same – it's not going to be the same offense game by game. when you see teams like even Houston, even though I don't like the way Houston played against San Diego State and their second game in the players' era, but when you see Houston, they're running a structured offense. When you see Kansas, they're running a structured offense. I look at teams like North Carolina, Duke, Alabama, and even teams like Tennessee who don't run a structured offense, and they live and die by, I'm either going to beat my guy and somebody's going to be open, or we need to make 16 threes. And that's concern. That's what's concerning. I do think this Alabama team is not going anywhere. I think this is a really tough part of their schedule, no doubt. And they got some tough games coming up for sure. Obviously, the game at North Carolina will be tough. I think that's a hard place to win. But I think that game is going to be as up and down as any game ever. But I'm not worried about this Alabama team. I'm just waiting for them to get hot from three, and they'll be just fine because they have some of the better shooters in the country, and guys like obviously the loss to Latrell Wrightsell really hurts, and prayers up to him and his family. But Mark Sears and when Christopher Youngblood comes back and what he was able to do at USF, not worried about this Alabama team, but it is concerning knowing that the shots aren't falling right now. But just like we mentioned when we were talking about Auburn, if the shots are falling in March, we saw it last year, right?
Yeah. I think it's just come down to, like you said, Gray, Nate Oates not really having a structured offense. If you watch Bama, they have a few good plays. They get players open, but the majority of their offense is, let me see if I can beat my guy off the dribble. Let me see if I can ISO here, try to get a driving pass out. I mean, interior pass out. It's driving kick. And when people defend that well, like Houston did, like Rutgers did, like Oregon did, the whole offense just sputters out of control. You saw it multiple times in that tournament. Terrible turnovers. I mean, each game, double-digit turnovers. Alabama is one of the worst teams when it comes to turnovers in the country. They're in the 200th range when it comes to turnovers. That's not something you can be doing when you're getting in March playing these good teams in a tournament where one possession could change the outcome of a game. And it's already done that. It changed the outcome of the Oregon game. If you don't turn the ball over that many times, you might win that basketball game. So Alabama has got to get a more structured offense going or start making three-pointers. Pick one. I think something that will be more reliant would be the more structured offense. But Nate Oates, he's been there for forever, it feels like, and he hasn't changed, so I don't think he's going to change now. So three-pointers just have to start falling. Mark Sears has to get his rhythm back. He's just in a slump right now. It's frustrating for him. It's frustrating for fans, but he'll figure it out. Everybody will figure it out. We saw Jaron Stevenson figure it out against Oregon, so it's not like it's the end of the world for the Crimson Tide just yet. It's just like we saw last year. They're struggling early part of the season in a very difficult schedule, but when they get into the SEC play and they get into that March Madness tournament, they'll be tested and they'll be ready to play these tougher opponents. So let's move away from basketball, Gray. And unfortunately, we have to talk about the Iron Bowl here. We'd be remiss if we didn't. Alabama, Auburn, 28-14. Alabama wins. Auburn forces 4 first-half turnovers, manages to somehow not score a touchdown with them. It's like beating dead horse at this point, Gray.
It's the same thing.
It's the same thing
every year. Yeah.
So let's just give like a season review here for Auburn, because at 5-7, the season's over. You're not making a bowl game. Probably fortunate for you because you don't have to watch Peyton Thorne play quarterback for Auburn ever again. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. But what are your takeaways from this 2024 Auburn team and what you saw from them in the future for this program going forward, Hugh Freeze?
Look, the future of the program is bright because of what we saw from the young players on this team. And if they're able to stick with this, what Hugh Freeze is building, and stick with not only the recruiting class, but also the vision that Hugh Freeze has for this program. I'm not talking about the on-field play or specific plays changing or specific personnel grouping changing, but the vision that Hugh Freeze is pushing is working because Auburn's had 2 successful recruiting classes after losing 4 straight losing seasons. So obviously the vision is there and the guys are buying into it. And what we saw from the young group of players throughout this season at multiple different points is very promising. Obviously, 3 of those 4 freshman receivers, Bryce Kane's going to be was redshirted this year, but 3 of those 4 freshman receivers making impact in different games. Cam Coleman really coming on as wide receiver number 1, even though Keandre Lambert-Smith was one of Auburn's best receivers we've seen since Courtney Taylor or Terry Beasley or something like that in the 90s or something. I don't even know. It's what we saw from Malcolm Simmons, Perry Thompson, Cam Coleman. And then on the offensive line, seeing Connor Liu take that leadership role as a true sophomore. And then what we saw on the defensive end specifically is mind-boggling. What we saw from the freshmen all year was the up-and-coming stars of Caleb Harris, Jay Crawford, DeMarcus Riddick, Malik Blockton, just over and over and over. Even guys like Amaris Williams and Jamonte Waller, who got hurt earlier in the year, they're not going anywhere. Very, very excited for the future to keep watching these guys and keep adding talent. Auburn was 18th this year in the 24/7 composite team rankings in terms of talent, and that's the highest they've been since 2022 or since 2021 actually, because Brian Harsin decided not to recruit when he was at Auburn. But it's
blank.
That is absolutely ridiculous. We can talk about that in a minute if you want. But that guy's just pathetic. What a loser. But he just did not recruit. So Auburn plummeted. Even, Gus Malzahn didn't have this team up in the top 10 of composite rankings, but he had them consistently in that 11 to 25 range, which was good enough to compete at that time in the SEC, and good enough to compete and win close games if you've got the playmakers at the right positions like Gus Malzahn did every so often. He had those playmakers. And that's what Hugh Freeze is trying to do. And I think Auburn continued moving up that rankings. We saw in this Iron Bowl, and we saw against Georgia when Auburn went to Athens, and you saw even against Oklahoma, when Oklahoma came to Auburn. I know Auburn very easily should have won that game without a late pick 6 from Peyton Thorne. The talent level is still not there yet for Auburn. There's a talent gap. There's about a 3-year talent gap in Auburn and Georgia, and Auburn and Alabama, and Auburn and Tennessee, and Auburn and LSU, and that's why you give Hugh Freeze time in this rebuild. I think he's got to win next year because that talent gap is going to shrink a lot, and you got a more favorable schedule next year, in my opinion. But him slowly but surely starting to close that talent gap and get Auburn back to what we saw with Gus Malzahn, having the playmakers at the right positions, having talent on the defensive end. I mean, goodness gracious. Some of the seniors were just pathetic in a lot of these games. Some of the redshirt juniors, the guys that Brian Harsin brought in, goodness gracious. They struggled. They struggled when not only the lights were brightest, but when they had to step up against the talent that an Alabama has, like a Georgia has, like an Oklahoma had. And I think that's the promising part, is the guys that did step up were the underclassmen, and the guys that Hugh Freeze brought in, and the guys that Hugh Freeze not only promised playing time immediately, but exceeded on that promise. And they were really good throughout the season. So I think that's something you can build on. And obviously a long off season ahead of Auburn. Go find a quarterback.
Yeah, I think Hugh Freeze has to win 8 games next season to keep his job. If he has another losing season, I don't think Auburn keeps him around. I don't care if he can recruit up there, top 5, whatever. Anybody can recruit at Auburn if they're from the Southeastern Conference. They have that capability, and go hire the potato farmer from Idaho. I mean, you can get people from the South to recruit. And if Hugh Freeze cannot put wins together for Auburn, they've proven they'll get rid of a coach and with snap of your fingers. I mean, they don't care. So
yeah, and I think the point about that, sorry I interrupted you there, but I think a point that a lot of people don't understand, especially on the national schedule or national side of things, is everybody's like, well, Auburn fired Brian Harsin after 2 years. They think they're so much better than what they actually are. We're not Arkansas. We aren't Mississippi State. Who do you think we are? This is Auburn. They are a top 15 program in college football history. They are not a bottom of the SEC type of echelon program. This is a place where you can come in, and if you have success and if you recruit, you can do anything. You can win SEC championships. You can win national championships. You can win Heisman. You can win the Heisman Trophy. You can bring in top talent, and you can send them to the NFL. And that's everybody's proven that except for Brian Harsin. Tommy Tuberville did it. Gus Malzahn did it. Gene Chizik did it. The narrative that Auburn thinks they're better just because they're Auburn is kind of wild to me, especially when it's coming from like the Clemsons and the Floridas and the Oklahomas. When, okay, y'all may be better than us right now. We are a much better program than y'all are. We have a much better NIL space than y'all do. We have a much better fan base than y'all do. Who are y'all? Who are you? Like, I'm not trying to say, oh, we're up there with Texas, or we're up there with Alabama, or we're up there with Notre Dame. No, I'm not saying that. But I better hear these Arkansas fans shut the hell up.
Yeah, so talking about Alabama here, they have that bad loss to Oklahoma, and they come back and they answer here getting the big win against Auburn. And what we saw from Alabama and Nick Sheridan's offensive play calling, it was almost like the flip switched in his head or something. He realized, oh, wait, I have two highly recruited running backs on my roster. Let me use them, because Jam Miller, 28 carries. That's 13 more than he's had this entire season in a game. The next closest was USF when he had 15. Justice Haynes obviously didn't have that many. He had 7 carries for 20 yards and a touchdown. And Jalen Milroe did lead the way with 104 rushing yards and the 3 touchdowns. But we saw the reliance on the running game and using that to set up the passing game, because they would use the run and they'd, oh, there's the tight end. There's Josh Cuevas. There's Dupree. There's Oots. Oh, here comes Jeremy Bernard down the sideline. And that's what Alabama and with Jalen Milroe at quarterback has to do. You have to use the run to set up the pass and not just spam QB power and Jalen Milroe using his legs to bail us out. You have to use the running backs running the football and Jalen Milroe running the football to win a football game. And if they can keep this going here, the way they've scripted the offense against Auburn, granted, Auburn is not the best football team in the world, but their defense was the best part of their team. But if Alabama can keep the way they're playing football like they did against Auburn, they can do great things. I know the season, depending on what happens in the ACC championship next week and how the committee votes with the rankings, might be over or not over, but we saw life from Nick Sheridan this game. And if he can do that next season, regardless who's a quarterback, I'll be happy. He was coaching for his life. I said it last week. Him and Kane Womack were coaching for their life this week, and they showed me flashes that make me happy for next season. So kudos to them. Kudos to the team for showing improvement, because they could easily come to Bryant-Denny and laid an egg and got blown out by Auburn. That could easily happen. A lot of people were expecting Alabama to just throw their hands up in the air. The season's over. Screw it. Everybody leave. But Alabama, that shows the culture they've had. And we've harped on that show after show, the culture Kalen DeBoer has built there. But for them to come in to their final home game for the seniors and battle it out and beat an Auburn team who might not be great, but when you play a rivalry game, anything can happen. That shows growth from this program in such a short period of time under Kalen DeBoer. Some other games that happened, Gray. You had number 7 Georgia beat Georgia Tech 44-42 in 8 overtime. You definitely tuned into
What was that?
Haynes King he played his tail off, but the one mistake he made ended up costing Georgia really the game with that fumble and that first down conversion he got. You had number 15 South Carolina beat number 12 Clemson 17-14. Looked like Clemson's season was going to be over, but then you turn around and number 6 Miami loses to Syracuse 42-38. Opens the door for Clemson, South Carolina, Alabama, Ole Miss, whoever you think should be in to get into the college football playoff. And then surprisingly, or unsurprisingly, depending on how you think of Ryan Day, he goes in at home and loses to Michigan, a terrible Michigan team. They have talent, but they don't have a quarterback. It's like they're running, just let me give it to the running back, spam inside zone the entire game. They lose to Michigan 13-10. Pitiful performance for a $22 million roster. Gray, with us having 1 week left with conference championships, and then we get the final rankings for the college football playoff, we can assume who the first 11 teams will most likely be. I mean, we can see that clear as day. But who do you think that last team gets in is? Is it Clemson? Is it SMU if they lose in the ACC championship game to Clemson? Is it Miami? Is it Alabama? Is it South Carolina? Is it Ole Miss? All these fans are rooting for their team, making all these claims they should be in. Who do you think gets that last spot in the college football playoff?
I honestly can give you an argument for each one of those that you named, except for Miami. Miami does not belong in. They should have like 5 losses right now and be headed to the Citrus Bowl. But I do think that the loser of that, if SMU loses to Clemson in the ACC championship, I think they're in. I think it's SMU. I don't think you have to listen to the 3 SEC teams or Miami. If SMU beats Clemson, I think you've got to. It's going to be very interesting to find out what the committee thinks about those 3 SEC teams. Alabama 3 losses, South Carolina with 3 losses, and Ole Miss with those 3 losses. How do you compare them? Obviously, Alabama, Ole Miss didn't play, but Alabama, South Carolina played, and Ole Miss, South Carolina played. Alabama beat South Carolina close at home, and Ole Miss went to South Carolina and buried them in South Carolina. Okay, Ole Miss and Alabama also both have a common opponent in Georgia. Both of them wins. Ole Miss dogged Georgia at home. Alabama kind of dogged them at home, but Georgia was able to come back and make that close. And then the final play to Ryan Williams in that fantastic game in Tuscaloosa. How do you compare each of these teams? And that's what the committee that's why the committee has a job and I don't, because I don't know how I would compare them, because I look at each one, I look at each resume, I look at the common opponents, you look at the head-to-heads, and you're like, but you also look at the bad losses. Like, what was Ole Miss's loss to Kentucky? What was Alabama's loss to Oklahoma? What was South Carolina's loss to Ole Miss? You can't score 3 points at home and expect to be a playoff team. You can't score 3 points on the road and expect to be a playoff team, Alabama. Ole Miss, you can't score 3 points, 3 quarters against a team that got dogged by Auburn and expect to be a playoff team. So it really is, you have three in front of you, and you're like, what? Where do we go from here? Because you can make an argument for each one, but you could also make an argument not for each one. And it's going to be very interesting to see how the committee values each tiebreaker as well, values each win specifically, and values how bad each loss was, and if each loss should disqualify a team. Like, you can't. I have no idea how they're going to do it. If it were me, golly, if it were me, and this is non-biased me here, I think right now you take Ole Miss, but Ole Miss lost to Kentucky in Oxford. Every time I'll say one, I'll be like, oh, but they did this, or but they also did that, but they did that. It's just like, what do you value over what? We're going to see if the committee. I hope this does happen, by the way. I hope SMU beats Clemson, because I think that disqualifies Clemson, because the only one out of those three that I think would be the top three that Clemson has the common opponent in is South Carolina, and they lost to them. So at home. So I think that disqualifies Clemson. Miami, I'm not even going to talk about them. They should not even be in this conversation. They lost to Syracuse. Will the committee value a brand? Easy, Alabama. Will the committee value playing the best football of those three teams right now? All right, South Carolina. Will the committee value the best win? All right, you're either going to pick Alabama or Ole Miss with their each win against Georgia. Will the committee value not having a horrific loss? Probably South Carolina. I have no idea what they're going to value. Obviously, this is new territory with teams having 3 losses and getting in the college football playoff. If this was last year, neither of these teams would be anywhere close to this playoff race. We'd be talking about if Oregon should still be in if they lose to Penn State, which, Oregon's in. Oregon doesn't even have to show up to Indianapolis to play that Big Ten championship game. So it's a completely different discussion, and I'm excited to see what the committee values and what we see for the college football playoff.
If Clemson loses and they put in South Carolina, you're going to hear a lot of uproar from Bama fans and Ole Miss fans, because at that point, why do we play head-to-head games? Why do we have a football schedule?
It's true.
Because, and I get it, South Carolina's probably playing the best football of the 3 right now, but there's head-to-head for a reason, and Alabama and Ole Miss won the head-to-head. So I think that takes South Carolina out of the picture entirely. Unfortunately for them, your 2 or 3 losses were 2 teams you're battling to get in the playoff against. That's just the way the cookies crumble. Ole Miss has the worst loss. I know Alabama lost to Vanderbilt and Oklahoma, but both those teams are bowl-eligible teams. Kentucky?
This is not.
Not even remotely close.
At home. That was in Oxford.
And I see ESPN tweeting, Miami is 4-1 on the road or 4-2 on the road against, or I don't know what the stat was, against bowl-eligible teams. So if we're going to keep talking about bowl-eligible teams, then Alabama's losses aren't that bad because they lost to bowl-eligible teams. I mean, if we're going to pick that stat, ESPN, let's be picky here. Miami didn't beat a ranked team this year. Let's be picky about that. Where's Miami's ranked win? Where's their marquee win? Is it Florida? Florida 7-5. I'm sorry. That's not a good win. That's not something I go into the college football playoff and go, yeah, we're putting Miami in over Alabama and South Carolina and Ole Miss because they beat Florida. Whoop-de-doo. Well, whoop-de-doo for Miami. That's just that they have to schedule more difficult games. So if I were the committee, I would put in Alabama if we're going to go off the criteria of you won the head-to-head and your losses, while they were bad, you lost to bowl-eligible teams. So it's not like it was completely bad like Ole Miss's loss. So with those parameters, I would put in Alabama. I know I'm seen more as an Alabama fan, but if I'm trying to be as least biased as possible here and look at everything I have in front of me, Alabama has to be the team in over South Carolina, Ole Miss, and Miami. They have the win over South Carolina. They don't have the bad loss Ole Miss has, and Miami doesn't have a ranked win. That's those 3 teams that are going to be left out. That's the reason you're left out. So going into next season and looking at the rankings when they come out finally, that's what you're going to be disappointed about. You lost to a Kentucky team. You didn't beat Alabama when you had the chance to, and you didn't schedule good enough opponents. That's just what the way college football is.
That's true. And this is going to be a great year for the committee to prove what they value most. Like if they put in South Carolina, it's all right. The September games don't mean anything. We just need to be playing our best football right now. If they put in Ole Miss, all right, you just had a terrible loss, but we're okay. We still got some really good wins. If they put in Alabama, it's oh my gosh, two really, really bad losses, but really good wins, really good wins, and they value the head-to-head. You say the same thing about Ole Miss. If they put Ole Miss over strictly South Carolina, they value the head-to-head. If they put in Miami, you might as well just schedule a bunch of FCS teams if you want to make the play. I mean, it's the same thing with Indiana. Indiana is in the playoff, and they deserve to be in the playoff. They're 11-1, but who in the world has Indiana played? Nobody. Outside of Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State, the Big Ten is worth nothing. Nothing. And it's hard to even say Ohio State's in there now after their loss to Michigan. And that's Indiana's quality loss, is on the road at Ohio State. Well, Michigan went in there and beat them. I know Indiana beat Michigan. So it's going to be a great year for the committee to set the standard on what they value the most, what they don't value as much, and that way moving forward, because it's a completely different situation when we're talking about undefeated and one-loss teams than talking about 3-loss teams. So that way moving forward in the college football playoff, they've got a set standard of, well, this is what we valued last year, so this is what we're going to value this year.
Before we get out of here, I will say that if Miami's left out, this might accelerate teams like Miami, who are in a lesser conference like the ACC, might accelerate their movement to a Big Ten or an SEC conference, because they'll be able to schedule these opponents and look at that favorability that everybody thinks the SEC and Big Ten get when they come to these selection committees. That might accelerate it going forward. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening and watching, students of the game.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.